All right, in this video, I'm going to show you how to use StatCrunch to do a confidence interval, both for the proportion and for the mean. And when we do the one for the mean, we're going to look at two examples, one where you have just summary information and one where you have a full set of data. So I've got this fake homework assignment here. I'm going to go into one of the questions. In a trial of 167 patients who received a 10 milligram dose of drug daily, 45 reported headaches as a side effect. And so part A here is just asking for p hat. Since we know this is in chapter 9, we know this is eventually going to then lead to a confidence interval. There are, of course, 3 more parts. One of them is going to be the confidence interval. So the reason that I'm mentioning that now, of course, I could just compute p hat. It would be 45 over 167. But the nice thing is that you can get that information from the confidence interval. So I'm going to go to question help and StatCrunch. I find that's the quickest way for me to get into StatCrunch while working a problem. You'll notice that it's not opening any data because it didn't link from any data. But to get a confidence interval for the proportion, you're going to go to Stat, Proportion Stats, 1 sample, and we only have summary information. We don't have data. We don't have a list, for example, of patients and whether or not they, yeses and nos for whether or not they had a headache. We just have the number of people who had a headache. So that's summary data. So the number of successes. This is about whether or not they had a headache, so that would be 45 people, and number of observations is your sample size, so that's 167, 45 out of 167. I'm just going to switch this toggle over here to confidence interval for P. Now, of course, I'm not at the confidence interval part yet in the question, so I don't know what level of confidence they want me to have, I'm just going to compute it on the default. You can leave this as standard, and then I'm just going to hit compute. I don't really need to do anything else. And so this information here, the sample proportion, that's my p hat, 0.26946, and then the lower limit and upper limit of my 95% confidence interval. So right now, to answer part A, I just need the sample proportion rounded to 2 decimal places, so that's going to be 0.27. So I'm just going to flash back here and put that in. Then I'm going to assume the answer here is yes. Let's get on with it. Okay, so now they do want 95% confidence, so that's helpful because that's what we got. If they had asked for a different level of confidence than what I just computed, you can always go back into StatCrunch, and in options you can edit your request for the analysis, and you can go in here and change this if you wanted something different. You can change it to 0.99, 0.9, whatever it might ask, but they of course wanted the 0.95. So the boundaries for the confidence interval are these two numbers here, the lower limit and the upper limit. So 0.202 and 0.337. 0.202 and 0.337. And so there you have it. That's a confidence interval for the proportion using StatCrunch. So I'm going to go ahead and close out StatCrunch for that. And I'm going to go on to the next question. I'm going to get yelled at here by the system. All right, so here we have, this is an example of an exercise where they're asking about the average value of something. Nutritionists determine how much time nationally people spend eating and drinking. Suppose we're a random sample of 1,067 people. The mean time is 1.44 hours with a standard deviation of 0.56 hours. It says complete steps A through D, so perhaps you don't really know that they're looking for a confidence interval. Let's just, I don't even know what this question's asking. The distribution skewed right, so since the distributions, we need a sample large enough, so go ahead and answer that question. Oh, I didn't read it carefully enough. Histogram is skewed to the right. Sample must be large enough. Since it's not normally distributed, there you go. I misread that. Okay. And so now, just more questions about sort of making sure the conditions are met. Sample size has to be less than 5% of the population. Okay. And now here we go. You can see they're asking for a 99% confidence interval. for the mean amount of time Americans spend eating or drinking. So a confidence interval for the mean. So I'm going to go again into question help StatCrunch. And so in stat, now you'll notice that the information given, all we know, we don't have any population information. We just know the sample mean and the sample standard deviation. So that means we're going to do a T interval. So I'm going to go to T stats, one sample with summary. We don't have the data on how much time people spent. Like, we don't have a list of numbers. We just have the summary of that data. So we have with summary. And it's going to ask us for the mean, standard deviation, and sample size. So the mean was 1.44, standard deviation was 0.56, and the sample size was the 1067. We are going to do a confidence interval, and it was 99% confidence, so I'm going to change that to 0.99 and go ahead and click compute. And so 99% confidence interval of the mean, we pulled up the right thing. Mean is mu, the sample mean was 1.44, standard error is that sigma or s over the square root of n. Sample size was 1067, so the degrees of freedom are 1066, one less. And then these last two numbers are your upper and lower limits. So 1.3, I don't know how they want us to round here, so let me see if I can't just slide that over a little bit. Round to 3 decimal places, so 1.396 and 396 and 1.44. And there you have it. There's our confidence interval for the mean from summary statistics. Now, how come I keep getting this wrong? The nutrition is 99% confident. The amount of time is between... the nutrition is 99%. The mean amount of time spent eating or drinking is between. Oh, see, that one says any individual amount of time spent. This is the mean amount of time. So those numbers should have gone here. 1.396 and 1.484. They want to make sure that you also have an understanding of what the confidence interval, how it interprets, how to interpret it. And so that's as far as we're going to go with that one. But that's how to get a confidence interval for the mean when all you have are summary statistics. And finally here, our last problem. Says the trade volume of stock is the number of shares of trade given per day. The following data are in millions, represent the volume of a certain stock traded for a sample of 40 trading days. So complete parts A through D. First it asks for a point estimate, and then it is going to eventually ask for a confidence interval. You'll notice they didn't give you the sample mean or sample standard deviation, but right here it says click the icon to view the data table, and there's the data. So this is these are 40 numbers representing the 40 trading days, and each one is the volume of stock. So we need a confidence interval based on this sample for what it is overall in the population. So the first thing they ask for is the point estimate, which is of course the sample mean. The nice thing, again, as you saw in the last page, is that the output of our confidence interval also gives you the sample mean. So I'm going to use this icon right here, click on that, and open in StatCrunch. So this will import all the data into StatCrunch for me, and then I'm going to go to the same place I did before, Stat T Stats. All we have is sample information, and we want to estimate the population mean, so it's a T distribution. So T stats, one sample, now with data. We have all of the 40 data points. Variable 1, make sure you select your column, that's the heading for the data there. And you don't have to do any of this other stuff, just click on confidence interval for the mean. Again, I don't know what level of confidence they're going to ask me for, so I'm just going to leave it at the default and click compute, because right now all it's asking me for is the point estimate or the sample mean. So that's 2.344. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. Okay. And now part B, I can close this since I've got it open in StatCrunch, a 90% confidence interval. So the numbers I have over here in StatCrunch are the 95. So I'm going to go to Options, Edit, and I'm going to go back and switch that to 0.90, compute. So So it recomputes it. You'll notice those numbers are different. The lower limit is L limit 2.02, 022. Okay, we did good on that. And then the upper limit is, or upper bound is the upper limit, U limit 2.667. Let's see. Okay, good. I did better on this confidence interval than the last one. And then, of course, they asked for an interpretation. So there you have it, an example of how to use StatCrunch to get confidence intervals for both the proportion and the mean.